welcome back to my channel. Now it is February, which means Valentine's Day is round the corner, and so a perfect opportunity to make an extremely loved up looking mega cake. And what's special about this cake is that you have helped me design it. So I asked on Instagram a few days ago to send in some designs and requests that you want to see on my Valentine's Day cake this year. So I took a few parts from a few of the designs and have put them all together, well, at least in my head, and hopefully they work when I apply them to the cakes. So what I'm going to start off with is the middle tier. Now, one of the designs suggested for me to do a solid gold tier, which I haven't done before, and I now have an airbrush, which I have become a little bit obsessed with. It's so fun, but I haven't done it directly onto a cake, and so I thought this was a great opportunity too. So this is going to be my middle tier, and this is actually a 5-inch cake because I want this 3-tier cake to be a little bit smaller than my usual 3 tiers, but I have written all the quantities for all the cakes in the description box. What I've done to this cake is I've given it a coating of ganache. So the ganache is super smooth and it's completely firm as well, and I think that the airbrush color will stick better to ganache than it would do to buttercream, especially lasting longer as well, which is why I coated it in ganache. I have done a whole tutorial masterclass about using ganache on cake, so be sure to head to my channel and check that out if you haven't already. So like I said, this cake has been chilled, so it's nice and firm, and now I'm going to decorate it with the gold color. Now, using an airbrush can be messy, and so to avoid any mess, I have quite a large cardboard box, which I'm going to place behind the cake. And I'm going to move the cake a little bit towards the inside just to minimize mess, because now I'm going to spray the color on from this way and not mess up the rest of my table or workspace. Depending on what airbrush you're using, depends on how you use it of course, but generally speaking, you do have a small vessel where the color goes in. So I'm going to go with gold and put the color inside. Turn on the machine and get spraying, so wish me luck. So it's always better to test out your airbrush first before you start, which I'm going to do just on the side of the box here, and then you can start going directly onto the cake. So I like to do it from a little further back, so it's more of an overall covering rather than you get streaky lines. And because I've used the brown, it's dulling the gold a bit, which I actually quite like because this gold can be a bit bright. But obviously go on with as many layers as you would like. There, I think I'm happy with that covering. So I believe that I've collected most of the gold spray inside the box, so I don't need this anymore because I've finished. So the metallic spray has to set, of course, which is why I did this first. I'm going to leave this to the side and get on with my next tier. So for the top tier of this cake, I'm going to use a 3-inch that I've got here. It's on its own board, of course, because we're going to stack the cake after. And I've covered it with a layer of white Swiss meringue buttercream, and it is cold because I'm going to use a stencil again. I used a stencil in my last video, and it was the first time I've used it. And I've got this gorgeous little heart one too, which I thought was perfect for the occasion. So I have some pink buttercream here. So I'm going to put the stencil around the cake. Now it's really hard to cover a whole tier with one stencil, especially because it doesn't fit. However, I'm going to do one section, freeze it, and then add the other. So I'm going to place the stencil on like this, and I'm going to hold it with my hand. I've tried toothpicks, I've tried ribbons, and I actually find the hand the most sturdy, but whatever comes to you and what's more comfortable for you is absolutely fine. I'm going to take a little bit of my pink buttercream and start placing it on and filling in those hearts with this lovely pink buttercream. I want to make sure that all of the hearts are covered with buttercream before I scrape off the excess. So just with my palette knife, I can simply lift off that excess buttercream, and you can already see the heart pattern forming. And I do like doing this with a palette knife rather than the scraper, because the scraper can start moving the buttercream too much and cover areas that you don't want to cover of the cake. But by going upwards with the palette knife, you avoid that. So now it's time for the big reveal. Woo! That worked really, really nicely. But obviously there is a section uncovered, but if I went straight away with this, these hearts that are already on there may get ruined. So I'm going to put this back in the freezer, get this super hard before I go over and fill in that final section. And of course, give this a wash too. So for the bottom tier of this cake, I thought to do a little bit of a line drawing around it, but in contrast to the top tier that is white with pink hearts, I wanted it to have a pink base and then do white lines. I think it will be a nice contrast between the two. So I'm going to use that same pink buttercream that I've been using for the heart stencil onto this crumb coated cake, as I usually would, taking bit by bit and spreading it onto the cake. Using the back of my palette knife to spread it round and over the top edges as well. And a little bit on top. So I want this whole cake covered before I start any sort of scraping, making it nice and flat, especially because it's for a tiered cake. And then getting my side scraper and scraping that nice and smooth. There were so many options to choose from for this cake, but a few of them had these simple line drawings of hearts. And sometimes I think when a lot's going on a cake, to actually keep it more simple is better. That's nice and smooth. Now I'm going to put this in the freezer because even though I'm going on top of the buttercream with some more buttercream, and I could probably do it now, on the safe side, I want this nice and cold, just in case I do a mistake or poke a finger in. It's always better to have the cake chilled. So this is going into the freezer for 10 minutes, and then when it comes out, I can also clean off the corners too. So while the bottom tier is in the freezer, the top tier is ready to go on with another load of stenciling. These hearts have completely solidified, which means it's safe to go on with the stencil again. I'm just going to carefully place the stencil so it's as in line as possible. And then go on with more buttercream. Now the main thing that I need to be careful of is not to overlap any hearts that are already there. Clean off the excess like last time, and hopefully, nice. So it is always obvious where the two seams meet, which can't be helped, but there's always a back to the cake, isn't there? So what I'm going to do is just clean off this top bit here, and I'm really happy with that. Overall, it's not perfect, it never is if you're doing stenciling in stages, but I've got a good overall covering of hearts. I'm going to put this back in the fridge to keep it safe, finish off my bottom tier, and then stack the cake. So bottom tier has just come out the freezer. It's nice and firm, so I'm going to cut off the corners before I do anything else. I have a sharp knife here, and because the buttercream is firm, the excess buttercream can come right off, revealing nice sharp corners. Nice and sharp. So now I can start with my line drawing. So I've got some white buttercream in a piping bag with a small round nozzle here. And I'm just going to pipe directly onto the cake. So it requires a steady hand, and I'm not going to mention how nervous I actually am, but I'm just going to go for it and have fun and not think about it too much. So I'm thought of doing some sort of continuous line, and every now and then a heart pops out. So let's see if it actually happens. And the trick is not to squash the buttercream against the cake too much. Not bad for the first try, and I'm just going to continue this all the way around the cake. I love it. It kind of looks like heart fairy lights all in a row. I think I'll just add a couple more smaller details. And I'm going to leave it like this for now. I may add more decorations or sprinkles or something just to elevate it. But now I'm gonna start stacking the cake, preparing all my tiers, and then gonna look at it as a whole and finish off the decoration. So stacking the cake, I've done a few tutorials on this already, so I won't go into too much detail, but because obviously this is a stacked cake, I need support. So I've got a couple of straws here, which I'm gonna put into the bottom tier of the cake. And then trim. Put a little bit of buttercream just so that second tier sticks to it. And because I've let it set, the gold hopefully won't come off in my hands. So I'm just going to take it off and place it directly onto the cake. And because it's ganache, it's nice and firm, which means I can actually push the cake and then a little bit on the top. Now, because it's ganache, it's a lot firmer than buttercream. And because this is a smaller 3-tier than I usually would do, I'm not actually going to bother with straws on the inside. Also, it's not going anywhere. But of course, if it is traveling or standing up for a long time outside, then I'd advise to put in straws. I'm going to take the small 3-inch and place it on the top of the cake. Oh, it's difficult when it's small. Oh. So I think I have a clear front to the cake, which is over here. So it looks a little bit disjointed, but this is why I wanted to stack it all together, because now I'm going to go on with a few pipes details, especially around the borders, hiding those seams. And then I have one decoration, which I'm so excited to show you too. So I have prepared a few piping bags with different shades of pink and different nozzles, and the first thing I'm going to do is add a border to each of these tiers, which is going to tie all the cake together. So I'm going to start off with this larger star tip, and I'm aware of where I start, which is going to be at the back of the cake, because there's always a little seam there, and start piping on scrolls. So this is actually a really classic way how to close the seams between tiers. If you look back on all different kinds of cake decorating, you'll always get a scrolled border, but it's coming back into fashion. So nearly done. There's just one more piece of decoration that I have been dying to show you, and it's this. This is a chocolate gelatin bow, which sounds crazy, but I saw this technique on Instagram and I had to try it. I love what I've created, but I feel like this is a one-time fluke. So don't worry, the tutorial of making one of these is on the way, but I've also linked where I originally saw the technique and recipe too in the comments box if you did want to try it out yourself. But I think putting on this bow in the middle of this cake is really going to complete the design. So before I put on the actual bow part, I'm going to position the ribbons. I think I want it coming from out here. So obviously it's going to stick to the buttercream, but because the ganache is dry, I'm going to put some buttercream underneath for it to stick to. And then for the main event, the big bow in the middle. So there we are, my Valentine's Day mega cake. Thank you all for sending in your suggestions. I genuinely don't think I would have come up with this design without them, so thank you. And thanks for watching. Once again, I have included all the relevant information in the comments box, but don't forget to check out my other tutorials on my channel, whether they're old or new tutorials. You've got all my recipes that I still use today on there. And if you haven't already, then subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with all the tutorials that I release. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.